On Thanksgiving Day, my son said, "If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would miss you. You're just this pathetic old man clinging to the past. Nothing but a walking ATM." Those cruel words came from my successful lawyer's son at our dinner table, cutting deeper than any blade. As extended family and friends watched in stunned silence, I realized Brad saw me as nothing more than a bank account, with legs, an obstacle standing between him and his inheritance. So I gave him exactly what he wanted. I vanished, leaving behind only an empty colonial house and a lesson he'd never forget. Before I tell you about the elaborate lesson I designed for my ungrateful son, drop a comment telling us your location and current time. Let's see how many fathers and mothers around the world can relate to being called just a walking ATM. But let me tell you how it really began. The morning of November 28th started like every Thanksgiving since Cordelia passed 3 years ago. I woke before dawn in our Portland colonial, preparing the feast she used to orchestrate so beautifully. 22-pound turkey, her famous stuffing recipe sweet potato, casserole, everything perfect for our family gathering. I set the dining room with Cordelia's good china, the spode Christmas rose pattern she'd collected over 20 years. 10 place settings this year, silver candlesticks, cloth, napkins. I'd invited the Hendersons from next door and my old teaching colleague Jim, people who'd known Cordelia and understood the importance of keeping traditions alive. Brad and Melanie arrived at noon. My successful attorney son looked polished in his tailored coat, scanning the rooms with what seemed like an appraiser's eye. "House looks good, Dad. Keeping up with maintenance, okay?" Uncle Gerald and Aunt Phyllis followed, then Cousin Timothy and wife Sandra, along with our longtime friends. The house filled with warm conversation, almost like the old days when Cordelia made everything magical. As we gathered around the table, I shared memories of past Thanksgivings. Cordelia always insisted we say what we were grateful for before carving the turkey. She'd go around the table, and everyone shared something meaningful. "Dad, we know," Brad interrupted, not looking up from his phone. "Same stories every year." She'd love seeing everyone together again. I continued, noticing our friends nodding respectfully. "Remember her beautiful place cards with everyone's names in calligraphy?" "Jesus Christ, Dad," Brad snapped. "Can we eat without the dead wife memorial service? Some of us have lives to get back to." Uncomfortable silence fell over the table. The Hendersons exchanged glances. Uncle Gerald cleared his throat. "Brad, that's your father you're talking to. And he's my father who can't let go of a woman who's been dead for 3 years." Brad shot back, his voice carrying across the room. "Look at this museum you're living in. When are you going to stop boring everyone with your pathetic nostalgia?" "Brad, please," Melanie whispered, aware of our guest's shocked expressions. But he wasn't finished. Standing up, my son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bicycle, whose college tuition I'd worked double shifts to pay, looked me straight in the eye with a room full of witnesses. "If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would miss you. You're just this pathetic old man clinging to the past. Nothing but a walking ATM. Face it, Dad. You're just an obstacle standing between me and my inheritance." The silence was deafening. Aunt Phyllis gasped. Our friends sat frozen in mortification. Jim, who'd taught alongside me for 15 years, looked like he'd been slapped. For a moment I felt something die inside me. Not just my heart breaking, but the very foundation of what I thought I knew about my own son crumbling into dust. "Please excuse me," I said quietly, setting down my napkin with hands that somehow remained steady. I walked out with as much dignity as I could muster, leaving behind a table full of people who'd just witnessed my son's public humiliation of his own father. Behind me, Uncle Gerald's voice cut through the air. "Bradley Fletcher, you should be ashamed of yourself." In my study, surrounded by family photographs and 40 years of teaching awards, I sat in my leather chair and listened to the awkward conversation resume. The damage was done, not just to me, but to Brad's reputation in front of people who'd known our family for decades. That's when something cold and calculating began to take shape in my mind. Something that would teach my son the most important lesson of his privileged life. The weekend stretched endlessly before me. Saturday morning found me still in my study, surrounded by cold coffee and scattered photographs. My son's cruel words echoing in the November silence. I hadn't left the house since Thursday evening. The house felt different now, emptier, as if Brad's cruelty had sucked the warmth from rooms where Cordelia's laughter once lived. Sunday brought clarity born from exhaustion and hurt. As dawn crept through the windows, I stared at our wedding photograph, Cordelia and me young and believing in forever. She'd been gone 3 years now, and that's when Brad changed. Not immediately, but gradually, like watching a favorite student lose interest in learning. The entitled comments started small. "Dad, you don't need this big house," then grew bolder. "Maybe it's time for assisted living." Until Thursday's final verdict walking ATM obstacle to inheritance. But as I sat in the pale Sunday light, something shifted. 43 years of teaching had taught me to recognize patterns. Bad behavior usually stemmed from deeper issues. I'd transformed countless difficult students through strategic challenges that forced them to confront their character. The hardest lessons require the toughest love. I'd written those words on my blackboard every September for 4 decades. The most difficult students weren't bad kids. They were lost kids who'd never faced real consequences. I walked to my filing cabinet and pulled out Brad's old report cards. Straight A's through high school dean's list at Stanford Law Review at Georgetown. Success had come too easily. I'd smoothed every obstacle, paid every bill, solved every problem before he knew it existed. I'd created this monster through kindness. By Sunday evening, the framework crystallized. This wasn't revenge. Revenge was emotional, temporary, hollow. This was education, about giving my son the one thing I'd failed to provide: genuine consequences for his actions. At 8 o'clock, I dialed Gilbert Fairmont. "Gilbert, it's Finlow Fletcher. I need your help with something unusual. I want to create what I'm calling an inheritance test, a 6-month trial to determine whether my son deserves what he thinks he's entitled to." Silence stretched across the line. Gilbert had handled our estate planning for over a decade, knew Brad since childhood. "Finlow, what happened on Thursday?" I told him everything. Every cruel word, every moment of humiliation. Gilbert listened without interruption. "Jesus," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. That boy has forgotten who raised him." "Exactly. He's forgotten because he's never had to remember. Everything's been guaranteed. The house, the inheritance, my support. It's all just been waiting like some cosmic trust fund." "What are you thinking?" I looked out at Cordelia's dormant garden. Make him prove he deserves it. Create a situation where he demonstrates genuine remorse, financial responsibility, and the ability to value me as a person rather than a bank account. And if he fails, then everything goes to charity and he learns what it means to lose something irreplaceable. Gilbert was quiet. "This is elaborate, Finlow, and potentially dangerous. My relationship with my son died Thursday night. This is about resurrection, not preservation." "All right, tell me what you need." Over the next hour, the plan took shape with classroom precision. House transferred to an irrevocable trust with performance conditions. Staged disappearance to simulate the loss he'd wished for. Monitoring system to track his growth or failure. 6 months to prove himself worthy. By the time I hung up, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Cordelia's death: purpose. Not bitter satisfaction, but the familiar anticipation of a master teacher preparing his most important lesson. I pulled out a legal pad and began sketching details. By Christmas, Brad would begin learning the most important lesson of his privileged life, assuming he was still capable of learning it all. Monday morning arrived with December's crisp bite. I stood outside Gilbert Fairmont's downtown law office at 9 o'clock, briefcase in hand, feeling like a general preparing for war. Gilbert's 15th floor office overlooked Portland's skyline, all mahogany and quiet confidence. He greeted me with concern etched across his face. "Finlow, are you absolutely certain about this?" "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." We spent the morning on legal framework. The house would transfer to an irrevocable trust with specific performance conditions. A mechanism protecting assets while ensuring beneficiaries met predetermined criteria. "The test parameters are clear," Gilbert explained. "Brad must demonstrate 3 things within 6 months. Genuine remorse, financial responsibility, without your support, and valuing you as a father, rather than a financial resource. And if he fails, everything goes to Portland Public Schools Foundation. Your life's work continues, just not through him." Tuesday brought our meeting with Denise Fairchild, a sharp-eyed real estate agent who owed Gilbert favors. Her Hawthorne office buzzed with market energy. "This is highly irregular," she said after hearing our plan. "Staging the fake sale, maintaining the illusion for months. We're not breaking laws," Gilbert assured her, just being creatively vague when asked. "The house will technically be sold. To the trust," I added. "You'll manage paperwork protecting everyone's privacy." Denise studied me with calculating eyes. "Your son really hurt you, didn't he?" "This isn't about hurting him back," It's about helping him grow up. She nodded. I'll handle signage and documentation. But if this goes sideways, I was following standard confidentiality protocols. Wednesday's drive to Mount Hood felt like pilgrimage. The winding highway climbed through snow-dusted Douglas firs, each mile taking me further from my old life. Chester Woodland's cabin nestled among towering pines, a rustic retreat, hosting city dwellers for 20 years. Chester was weathered 70s suspicious, but warmed by my explanation of needing space after family troubles. City folk usually come here running from something, he observed. What's your story, Professor? Family disappointment. Sometimes distance provides clarity. Mountain air clears the head. Planning to stay through winter. Possibly through spring. Depends how long healing takes. Thursday and Friday blurred in preparation. Gilbert established monitoring. Discreet inquiries through mutual acquaintances, financial tracking, through banking connections, social observation through Portland's professional community. I'll know within days if Brad makes genuine changes or doubles down on entitlement, Gilbert assured me. I packed methodically, selecting items suggesting hasty departure while ensuring mountain necessities. Clothes, books, photographs of Cordelia for the loneliness ahead. Hardest was leaving 43 years of teaching materials. Lesson plans, student letters, education awards, all waiting to see if my final student could learn what mattered most. Friday evening, I signed final trust documents in Gilbert's office. My signature felt heavy each letter, carrying decades of what I was strategically dismantling. The house is officially protected, Gilbert said, notarizing the last page. To the world, it appears sold to a private buyer, valuing confidentiality. Only we three know the truth. If Brad contests it, he'll fight a legal structure designed by someone practicing estate law 30 years. Good luck to him. Preparing to leave Portland, I sat at my kitchen table one final time and wrote the note that would shatter my son's world. You were right. I disappeared. Now prove you deserve what you wanted. Simple words launching the most complex lesson of both our lives. Next week, Brad would discover that getting what you wish for can be the cruelest gift of all. 2 weeks passed in mountain silence before my trap sprung with classroom precision. I knew Brad's habits. Third Saturday every month, he'd check on the old man, though visits had grown perfunctory since Cordelia's death. December 15th arrived gray and cold. From my cabin 70 miles away, I could only imagine the scene unfolding at Elm Street. Brad's BMW pulled into the driveway at 2 o'clock, punctual as always. He'd probably brought coffee in Danish, the same minimal effort gesture for 3 years running. But everything was different. The sold sign stood prominently on the lawn, Denise's professional touch evident. The house sat empty, windows dark, carrying the hollow look of abandonment. I pictured Brad's confusion shifting to alarm as he noticed missing cars absent weekend projects. His key still worked, but the silence must have been deafening. My note waited on the kitchen table. You were right. I disappeared. Now prove you deserve what you wanted. His lawyer instincts kicked in immediately. Within minutes, he was calling Denise Fairchild, demanding explanations, threatening legal action. Denise played her role flawlessly. Mr. Fletcher, your father was clear about his wishes. Cash buyer, quick closing seller requested complete privacy. All perfectly legal. Who was the buyer? I'm not at liberty to disclose that. Your father specifically requested confidentiality. That's my inheritance you're talking about. Sir, with respect, it was your father's house. He had every right to sell it. His next call went to Melanie downtown. Drop everything and get to Dad's house. Something's happened. Melanie arrived within 30 minutes, face pale with genuine concern. Brad, what's going on? Where's your father? Gone. Vanished. Sold the house without telling anyone. That doesn't sound like him. Are you sure he's okay? Who cares if he's okay? He stole my inheritance. The words revealed more than Brad realized. Melanie stared at her husband with growing recognition of something she'd been ignoring for months. By evening, family assembled in emergency session. Uncle Gerald and Aunt Phyllis arrived, grim-faced accusations flying. This is your fault, Bradley, Uncle Gerald said bluntly. The way you've treated that man since Cordelia died, shameful. He's being dramatic. People don't just disappear because of one argument. One argument, Aunt Phyllis's voice cracked. We heard what you said at Thanksgiving, calling your father a walking ATM in front of everyone. I've never been so embarrassed. The police station visit proved fruitless. Detective Martinez listened patiently and delivered his verdict with professional sympathy. Sir, your father left voluntarily. We have his note indicating intentions. No signs of foul play, no evidence of mental incapacity. But he sold my house. He sold his house, Mr. Fletcher. There's a significant legal difference. Can't you file a missing person report? We can, but it won't change anything. He's not missing. He's gone. And he had every right to leave. The drive home was silent, Melanie staring out the window while Brad fumed. Finally, she spoke the words that cut deeper than any police report. You're not even worried about him, are you? Your father disappears, and all you can think about is money. Brad's response revealed everything. That money was supposed to be mine. He had no right to take it away. In that moment, Melanie realized she was married to a stranger, someone who valued inheritance over the man who'd raised him. The Brad she'd fallen in love with was disappearing too, replaced by someone whose heart had turned to calculation. While my son raged through Portland's legal system, I discovered something unexpected in Mount Hood's shadow. Peace. Chester's cabin nestled among snow-heavy Douglas firs. Each morning, strong coffee sunrise painting mountain peaks gold. The silence was profound. No dread, no managing others' expectations. My days belonged to me alone. Physical work felt good. Splitting kindling muscles, remembering younger years. Winter air's bite, growing wood piles, earning warmth through effort became my prayers. Betty Creekstone ran the local store with fierce protectiveness, suspicious of city refugees. You running from law or wife? She asked during my third visit. Family disappointment. Those can be worse. Chester says you're a teacher. Was 43 years Portland schools. Her demeanor shifted. We need teachers. Kids struggle with reading during winter break. That's how I found purpose again. 3 children came Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. Tommy 8, Sarah 10 with undiagnosed dyslexia. Marcus 12, bright but bored. Initially shy, they soon sprawled on worn rugs, working through reading exercises I improvised. Mr. Finlow, why do letters mix up in my head? Sarah asked. Your brain's wired differently, sweetheart. Not wrong, different. Some smartest people I've known had brains like yours. Parents showed quiet gratitude. Split wood appeared fresh bread Christmas invitations I declined. Christmas arrived crisp and clear. I spent it alone but not lonely reading Cordelia's favorite Dickens aloud. For the first time since her death, remembering brought comfort instead of grief. Evening brought my Gilbert call. How's monitoring set up? Everything's ready. Discreet contacts watching Brad's behavior, financial tracking, social observation. After New Year's comprehensive reports, what are you seeing? Anger, legal threats, no self-reflection. Expensive lawyers, thousands spent tracing the buyer. Still focused on money, not missing father. I stared at snow-covered pines. Maybe he's beyond saving. Give it time. Hardest lessons take longest. New Year's Eve found me on Chester's porch, wrapped in Cordelia's quilt, watching distant Portland fireworks. 3 years since cancer stole my wife. 3 years watching my son transform into someone unrecognizable. But here I'd rediscovered something essential. The teacher in me hadn't died. It had waited for students needing what I offered. Tomorrow, Gilbert would begin formal monitoring. 6 months for my son to remember who raised him, choose love over greed, prove he deserved forgiveness. The question haunting my mountain solitude. Was my son still capable of learning the lesson that mattered most? January arrived like a bill collector demanding payment for years of willful ignorance. The new year brought harsh reckonings Brad had never imagined possible. The first shock came reviewing finances. For months I'd been quietly supplementing their lifestyle, covering Brad's credit card overages, paying shortfalls, smoothing rough patches before they knew they existed. Without my invisible safety net, their true financial picture emerged with brutal clarity. Their upscale Pearl District apartment rent came due $3,800. Brad stared at their bank statement calculator in hand numbers, refusing to improve. This can't be right. Where did all the money go? Melanie looked at accumulating legal fees. 3 law firms' private investigators' court filings. Brad's quest to recover stolen inheritance had cost $15,000 in December alone. Maybe we should consider a smaller place, she suggested. Absolutely not. We're not living like poor people because my father had a midlife crisis. But reality cared nothing for Brad's pride. By mid-January, they were selling possessions with desperate urgency. Brad's Rolex Submariner, my law school graduation gift, went to a pawn shop for fraction value. Melanie's grandmother's jewelry followed memories, meaning less than monthly expenses. The BMW lease return felt like public failure admission. Brad signed papers with shaking hands while Melanie waited in their 10-year-old Honda Civic, the emergency backup, now their only transportation. Meanwhile, Gilbert's monitoring network provided reports from my mountain refuge. No genuine remorse, Gilbert told me during our weekly call. Another law firm hired thousands on investigators, still focused on getting the house back, not understanding why you left. What about Melanie? Working double shifts trying to keep them afloat. Friends say she's asking different questions about Brad's relationship with you, family priorities. She's seeing patterns she'd ignored. The eviction notice arrived January 28th, 30 days to vacate due to non-payment. The formal document shattered Brad's illusions about this temporary setback. This is temporary, he insisted while packing. Once I get the house back, we'll buy something better. But Melanie was changing. Each box packed each possession, sold each forced compromise, taught lessons about wants versus needs, image versus substance. Their new apartment sat across the river, 800 square feet for $1,200 monthly. No doorman, no river views, no granite countertops. Just basic shelter straining their reduced budget. Look at this place. Brad surveyed their diminished circumstances. My father did this to us. He stole our future. Did he, Melanie asked quietly, or did he stop subsidizing our present? The question hung like smoke. For the first time, Melanie saw their marriage clearly. How much comfort had depended not on Brad's success, but his father's quiet generosity. I keep thinking about Thanksgiving, how you talked to him, what you said about inheritance. Maybe he didn't abandon us. Maybe we drove him away. Don't take his side. I'm not taking sides. I'm wondering when we stopped being grateful for what we had and started feeling entitled to what we wanted. That night, lying in their thin-walled bedroom with neighbor's television bleeding through, Melanie stared at the ceiling and realized something obvious. Maybe her father-in-law had been right about them after all. February brought news that both vindicated and worried me. Gilbert called with reports of Brad's desperate measure, hiring Detective Brennan to track me down. He's paying Brennan $500 daily to find you, Gilbert said. Still calls it recovering stolen assets. No mention of missing his father. But Detective Brennan was thorough beyond Brad's expectations. Instead of following paper trails, he interviewed people who'd known me. Colleagues, former students, neighbors who'd watched me teach for 43 years. The testimonials painted a picture my son had never seen. Your former principal called you the heart of Jefferson High, Gilbert reported. Said you tutored struggling kids after hours, spent your own money on supplies, never missed parent conferences. Bethany Whitmore, now a pediatrician, told Brennan how I'd recognized her dyslexia when others labeled her slow. James Morrison, currently city councilman, described how I'd turned him from angry teenager to believer in education's power. Dozens of these stories, Gilbert continued, people whose lives you shaped. Brad's learning his father wasn't some boring teacher. He was someone who mattered to hundreds. The most damaging discovery came through financial records. For 2 years, I'd been quietly paying Brad's credit card debts. Thousands in overspending he'd never known I covered. Brad had no idea, Gilbert said. Thought his lifestyle was sustainable alone. Brennan showed bank records proving you'd subsidized his life since Cordelia died. Meanwhile, Melanie insisted they enter couples therapy with Dr. Angela Springdale, who specialized in communication breakdown and entitlement issues. Through February and March, Gilbert received reports about weekly sessions. Dr. Springdale peeled back layers of justification Brad had built around his behavior. She's making him confront uncomfortable truths, Gilbert told me. About treating you inheritance assumptions fear he's not actually successful as he pretends. Therapy revealed Brad's deep insecurity. Beneath lawyer confidence lay terror of not measuring up to my quiet strength and decades of service. Dr. Springdale asked when he'd last done something for you instead of expecting you to do for him. Brad couldn't answer, sat there 10 minutes trying to remember. Slowly, my son examined the relationship he'd taken for granted. Weekly dinners I'd prepared after Cordelia died. Financial safety nets provided without acknowledgement. How I'd listened to his complaints without sharing my own grief and loneliness. He's starting to miss you, Gilbert said in early March. Not the house, not inheritance. You. Keeps picking up the phone to call about random things, then remembering you're gone. The breakthrough came during final March session. Dr. Springdale pushed Brad to identify what he really wanted, house money or something deeper. I don't want the house back, he finally admitted. I want my father back. I want to tell him I'm sorry. I want him to know I love him more than any inheritance. From my mountain cabin, I felt something shift. Not quite forgiveness, but its possibility. After 4 months' observation, my son was asking right questions, feeling right regrets. But words in therapy differed from real-world actions. Brad needed to prove his transformation was genuine, not performance. That's when Detective Brennan made his breakthrough. I found a lead, Gilbert told me, April 1st. Brennan traced Mount Hood cabin rentals, narrowed to few possibilities, including Chester's place. The final phase was beginning. Soon my son would choose between the man he'd been and the man he claimed to want to become. I knew they were coming before Gilbert called to warn me. Chester had mentioned a couple asking questions at Betty's store. Word travels fast in mountain communities, especially when outsiders inquire about someone locals protect. From my cabin window, I could see the winding road that would bring my son to this reckoning. 2 hours of nervous conversation lay ahead as their Honda climbed through Douglas firs toward whatever reconciliation or rejection awaited. I imagined Brad practicing his apology during the drive, words he should have spoken months ago. Melanie would offer encouragement, this woman who'd become the moral compass our family needed. Their first stop was inevitable. Betty's store, unofficial information center for our scattered community. Two well-dressed city folks would immediately be marked as outsiders by anxious expressions and soft hands. Betty's interrogation would be thorough. Decades of dealing with weekend warriors and urban refugees had taught her to read people. "You looking for the professor?" she'd ask, using my community nickname. "That man's been hurt enough. What do you want with him?" I imagined Brad's stammering explanation, lawyer, confidence crumbling under Betty's protective scrutiny. "He's been teaching our children," she'd tell them eventually. "Reading, helping with homework, showing patience their schools can't afford. First person to really listen to my grandson Tommy in years." The shame would hit Brad then. Strangers valued his father more than family had. These mountain people had embraced me in 4 months more completely than my son had in years. Chester's reaction would be similar, but more direct. The cabin owner had developed genuine affection for his quiet tenant. "You his boy," Chester would ask, sizing up Brad with frank assessment. "Heard about you. Heard about Thanksgiving?" Each person Brad encountered would tell him something new about the man he'd dismissed. Stories of generosity, patience, wisdom shared with people who appreciated what they received. By the time they reached my cabin, Brad would carry the weight of recognition, not just of his father's worth, but of his own blindness to it. I heard their car approaching engine laboring up the steep grade. Through my window, I watched them park beside the woodpile I'd built through winter months. They sat for several minutes, Brad gathering courage for a conversation that would determine whether our relationship could be salvaged. I could see him through the windshield, this successful lawyer, reduced to a nervous son, preparing to face the father he'd driven away. Afternoon sun slanted through pines as they finally approached. Smoke rose from my chimney, evidence of comfortable life built in their absence. From inside came children's laughter. Tommy, Sarah, and Marcus had arrived for their regular Thursday session. I watched Brad peer through the window, saw his face change as he observed the scene within. His father, the man he'd called irrelevant, sitting with 3 mountain children reading from worn Charlotte's Web, with the same patient attention he'd once given Brad's bedtime stories. That's when my son finally understood what he'd lost. Not money or inheritance, but the presence of someone who'd loved him unconditionally for 35 years. Someone who'd given that generous spirit to strangers because his own family no longer wanted it. I watched him collapse onto Chester's front steps, shoulders shaking with recognition and regret. For the first time since Thanksgiving, Brad was crying for his father instead of his inheritance. The question haunting these final moments was written across his face. What if forgiveness was no longer possible? What if some damage couldn't be undone? The knock on my cabin door came at 4:30 on April 28th, exactly 6 months after the Thanksgiving dinner that had shattered our family. Through the window, I could see Brad standing on Chester's weathered porch steps. Melanie beside him, both looking like pilgrims who'd traveled further than the 70 miles from Portland. The children had just left after our regular Thursday session, their laughter still echoing in the cabin's warm interior. Now, silence stretched between the door and the man I'd raised the space, heavy with 6 months of separation and the weight of words that needed saying. I opened the door to find my son's face streaked with tears, his expensive lawyer's composure completely abandoned. This wasn't the entitled man who'd called me a walking ATM. This was someone broken and rebuilt by consequences he'd never imagined facing. Dad, he whispered the word carrying more weight than any legal brief he'd ever written. I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry for what I said, what I did, what I became. For a moment, I simply studied him. The test had been designed to reveal character, and I needed to see whether his transformation was genuine or another performance for an audience. Tell me about your journey, son, not the drive up here, the real journey. So he did. Standing on that mountain porch with Melanie's hand in his, Brad told me about losing the apartment, selling possessions, learning what financial struggle actually meant, about Detective Brennan's investigation revealing the father he'd never really known, the teacher who'd touched hundreds of lives, the man who'd quietly paid his debts for years. I found out about the credit cards, he said, voice cracking. All that money you spent covering my mistakes, and I never even knew. I treated you like you were nothing when you were everything. About Dr. Springdale's therapy sessions that had forced him to confront his own entitlement and fear. About missing me. Not my money, but my presence, my voice, my unconditional love that he'd taken for granted until it disappeared. I don't want the house back, Dad. I want my father back. I want to earn your forgiveness if that's still possible. That's when I heard Gilbert's car approaching up the mountain road, right on schedule as we'd planned months ago. There's something you need to understand, I said as my old friend emerged from his vehicle, briefcase in hand. About the house, about these 6 months, about what's really been happening. Gilbert spread the trust documents across Chester's kitchen table, while Brad and Melanie stared in confusion. The legal framework I'd constructed became clear, as my friend explained each carefully crafted clause. Your father never actually sold the house, Gilbert said. It was transferred to an irrevocable trust with specific performance conditions. You've been taking what we called the inheritance test. 6 months to prove you could change, grow, and value your father as a person rather than a bank account. Brad's face cycled through shock, understanding, and something that might have been relief. You mean this was all planned? The monitoring, the reports? Every step, I confirmed. I needed to know if my son could learn the lesson I'd failed to teach through 40 years of making life too easy for him. And the test results, Gilbert smiled. You passed, Brad. Not because you found me, but because you genuinely changed. The man sitting here today isn't the same person who spoke those cruel words at Thanksgiving. Chester appeared in his doorway, drawn by the conversation. Betty had followed Gilbert up the mountain, her protective instincts replaced by curiosity about the reunion she'd helped facilitate. This boy's been learning some hard lessons, Betty observed, studying Brad with the same frank assessment she'd given me months ago. Mountain folk can tell when someone's heart has changed. His has. The reconciliation that followed wasn't immediate or easy. 6 months of hurt couldn't be erased by explanations and apologies. But it was real, built on genuine remorse, hard-won understanding, and the recognition that love requires more than blood relation. As the sun set behind Mount Hood's peaks, painting the cabin in golden light, we talked about the future. I would return to Portland, but our relationship would be different. Built on mutual respect, rather than assumed obligation, on gratitude rather than entitlement. I want to be the son you deserved, Brad said as we prepared to leave the mountain that had taught us both so much. You already are, I replied, meaning it for the first time in years. The house would be ours again, but more importantly, we would be a family again, scarred by our mistakes, but stronger for having faced them honestly. Sometimes the hardest lessons require the toughest love. Sometimes you have to lose everything to understand what really matters. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get a second chance to love the people who matter most. Looking back on this journey, I realize how close I came to giving up on my son forever. Don't be like me. Don't wait until cruel words are spoken at your dinner table to teach the lessons that matter most. I spent 43 years as an educator, yet I failed to teach my own child the most important subject, gratitude. God gave me the strength to create this test when I thought my son was beyond saving. Through those dark months on Mount Hood, I learned that sometimes love requires tough consequences, trusting that the Almighty has a plan even when we can't see it. The Lord works in mysterious ways, turning our deepest disappointment into our greatest teaching moments. This true story taught me that being a provider isn't enough. Our children need to understand the difference between being loved and being entitled. Like so many grandpa stories passed down through generations, this one carries a simple truth. Respect and appreciation must be earned and taught, not assumed. Brad learned that harsh lesson when he discovered what life looks like without the safety net he'd taken for granted. Our reconciliation wasn't just about forgiveness. It was about understanding that true family bonds are built on mutual respect, not financial dependency. If you're a parent or grandparent watching your children take your sacrifices for granted, don't make my mistake of enabling them for too long. Set boundaries early. Teach them the value of what they receive. Show them that love isn't measured in dollars, but in presence, patience, and genuine care. This true story reminds us that it's never too late to change course. Whether you're the parent feeling unappreciated or the child who's forgotten to say thank you, remember that families can heal when pride gives way to humility. God blessed our family with redemption when we needed it most. These grandpa stories aren't just entertainment. They're reminders that every relationship requires tending like a garden that withers without attention but flourishes with care. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below telling us about your own family lessons learned. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true stories that remind us what really matters in life.